Hello, everyone. This is actually my third attempt to successfully record and upload this presentation, so I'm going to be a little bit more brief than I had been in previous iterations of this, just so we can get through it, get it uploaded, and let you give me some feedback on it. Thank you for watching. This presentation is for my proposed study, How Does Participation in Dual Enrollment Affect Student Perceptions of College Readiness and College Decision-Making? A phenomenological case study. So let's dive in. The statement of my problem, my research problem, is there an identifiable relationship between student perceptions of dual enrollment programs' effects on college readiness and then the decision-making process of those participants as prospective undergraduate students? There is a broad swath of evidence in the literature that dual enrollment programs benefit students and higher ed institutions in terms of increased enrollments, a reduced financial burden on students, and enhanced student success metrics as well. But there isn't as much research concerning the utility of dual enrollment as a recruitment tool, and even less or none examining the relationship between those two functions of college readiness and college recruitment. So the purpose of this study is to gain insight into the perceptions of former dual enrollment students concerning their college readiness, their decisions on where to attend college, and the institution they dual enrolled with itself. And we're looking at three groups here: students that matriculated to their dual enrollment institution, students that ended up going to another four-year institution, and then students who attended a two-year community college. My research questions are as follows. How does participation in dual enrollment affect student perceptions of college readiness? And how does participation in dual enrollment affect student perceptions of the institution as part of the college decision-making process? For a little bit of context, this study is obviously focusing on the dual enrollment program at MTSU, of which I am the program coordinator. A little bit of background here: as of fall 22, MTSU's overall headcount was just over 20,000, and almost 1,100 of those students were dual enrollment students included in that number. This program emerged kind of in its current form in 2015. A couple of things happened that led to a confluence of events. The state of Tennessee expanded state grant funding for dual enrollment students and standardized the tuition rate for those students across the state, making it more affordable and in many cases free for these students to take these courses. So the university in turn decided to expand their dual enrollment offerings to enhance relationships with the high schools that we work with and bolster enrollments as well. So you can see there on the chart, dual enrollment headcount by year. Fall of 2014, we had 34 students. These were mostly one-offs. And then in the first year of expansion, we jumped to 405 students, culminating in a high in fall of 2019 of 1,221 students. There are a couple of formats that these courses take in terms of dual enrollment. In-person instruction at local high schools is the most predominant one. There are also self-contained online sections of courses that are reserved specifically for these students. And then there are a small percentage of students that actually come onto the college campus and or take classes online with the general undergraduate population. The program has 4 full-time staff that are responsible for all aspects of the program, most notably assisting students from beginning to end. There are criteria for participation. Students have to have a 3.0 grade point average or 22 ACT composite, and specific courses have their own test score benchmarks for participation as well. Students complete the application process, but generally the dual enrollment staff actually register students for their courses. All courses are taught by MTSU instructors. It's about a 60-40 split. 60% of instructors are actually full-time faculty or adjuncts sent by MTSU, and the other 40% are embedded instructors that teach at the high school already, but also meet the credentials and have applied for hire as adjuncts to MTSU. So moving into an overview of the literature that was consulted here, I broke my literature review into 5 categories that I think are pertinent and timely. The first being student success, broadly speaking, what that means, the history of student success, dual enrollment history, structure and policy, and then the effects of dual enrollment on student success. Then I move into an overview of recruitment, enrollment management, and finally, what literature does exist on dual enrollment as a recruitment tool. So in terms of student success, we go back to the 1930s and the conception of student mortality kind of set the stage. And then over the next few decades, attitudes began to shift. Thielen in particular talks about this transformation from institutions thinking that higher dropout rates are a good thing, right? That they free up kind of overburdened resources on campuses and they kind of underscore the rigor of these institutions. Transitions into a very different thought about student success and how we should be aiming as higher ed practitioners to increase the amount of students that are completing and retaining. Tinto's and Spady's models in particular are fundamental to what we think about in terms of student success. And so since then, since 1970, over half of all states have implemented some sort of state funding mechanism based on these outcomes. The 2 predominant ones that are referenced are persistence and degree completion, or we also would refer to them as retention and graduation. Since 2010, Tennessee, the state that is highlighted in the study, their Complete College Tennessee Act has allocated funds based on those metrics as well. But there are other characteristics of student success that are referenced frequently in the literature, other quantitative metrics. We're talking about grades, earned credit hours, admission rates to graduate programs, and employment and wage data in particular as well, post-graduation. But then we think about qualitative metrics as well for determining student success. Aston referenced student satisfaction. There's also the concept of personal development among students and student engagement, which is kind of an emergent sort of intermediate outcome, right? So students are becoming engaged while they're enrolled, and that engagement ends up allowing them to be successful in their curricular studies. Then we move to review of dual enrollment literature. There's no consensus on when the dual enrollment program as we know it first emerged. University of Connecticut claims to have had the first program established in '56, but in the '70s is when we really see dual enrollment programs taking off statewide and also specifically within institutions. So you had some states that were pushing this, and you had higher ed institutions as well concurrently that were seeing this as something they wanted to be involved in. Syracuse, FIU, and especially City University of New York had sort of landmark programs that had to do with dual enrollment. At this point, almost all states have established statutes concerning dual enrollment programs. Dual enrollment has been described as the fastest growing movement in higher ed in the 21st century, and over 90% of high schools now offer dual enrollment per the U.S. Department of Education. The common theme in these programs, which can vary greatly overall, but the common theme is that it's an opportunity for high school students to enroll in post-secondary courses and earn credit for both high school and college. Great quote here, by providing a pathway for students to move seamlessly between K-12 and post-secondary systems, dual enrollment is thought to provide greater support for students' college aspirations. In addition to helping states and institutions meet benchmarks for college readiness, dual enrollment has also been linked to different types of student development, referenced in the literature as trying on the role of college student, enhancing the clarity of the college student role, an on-ramp to college for underprepared students, and a fast track for those already college bound. And I really like a liminal space to confront tension and unease surrounding transitions. Those are just some of the conceptions I found in terms of student development and how dual enrollment impacts that. As I mentioned previously, there is broad evidence that dual enrollment has positive effects on student success, enhanced self-efficacy, an increase in GPA, a decrease in the need for remedial coursework, increased chances of completing a degree, increased first-year retention rates, and reduced time to degree. These are all referenced in this literature, mentioned in the presentation, as well as several other sources as well. So talking about recruitment broadly, We think about strategic enrollment management. That became sort of something that almost all colleges started to embrace in the 1970s due to, again, a confluence of factors: decline in the number of high school graduates, which meant fewer potential students. There were shifts in public policy and a challenging economy in the 70s. In terms of strategic enrollment management, Huddleston kind of delineates that into 7 sort of functions or areas. You see listed there: research and planning, marketing, admissions, a registrar's office, financial aid office, student orientation, and then retention advising, kind of comprising enrollment management. The admissions funnel has been popularized as a visual for how students move through the admissions process, and institutions are spending a lot of money on marketing to students. The average cost per undergraduate in a Noel Levitt study in 2020, they conducted a survey with public and private institutions, and you see the numbers there. Private institutions spending over $2,000 per student just in marketing costs. And a Washington Post article actually in 2021 estimated that in 2019, over $2 billion was spent on marketing to undergraduate students by universities. Recruitment in general, as you can tell, has become more consumer driven, but recruitment strategies have kind of been behind the 8 ball in terms of evolving in what students are seeking. And the research suggests that institutions should be adopting an approach focused on value, relevance, transparency, and support services as kind of the linchpins of what this generation of students is looking for. Not as much attention, as I referenced before, on dual enrollment as a recruitment tool. Stevenson does mention, in looking at dual enrollment programs, a need for them to move beyond just an enrollment source to actually looking at how do we assist students understanding college, offering student services that are the same undergraduates would get, dedicating full-time staff to dual enrollment, and robustly evaluating these programs. An ACRO survey in 2016 did find that over 75% of institutions that responded considered dual enrollment a recruitment tool. And Kinnick made the point, that as institutions are allocating increasing amounts of resources to these types of programs in an era where funding anything is challenging, there is a need for justification for why these programs exist and why they're funded. Great quote here from Jagizic on the triangulation between dual enrollment, recruitment, and student success, which is kind of where my study is heading. Higher ed institutions offering programs are able to rely on 2 factors that are key to college enrollment and persistence to convert participants to full-time students. Students and parents see the enrollment institution as an option desirable due to its proximity to their home, the benefits this brings. They're more likely to feel engaged and connected to that institution, given they've had some experience with it already in terms of taking classes, earning credits, and possibly interacting with other students. So to talk about methodology, a couple different sections here I'll go through very briefly. The first I want to touch on is the research design of this study. As I mentioned at the outset, this is a phenomenological case study, which is a hybrid of 2 established approaches, a phenomenology and a case study. Morse calls it a multiple method design and indicates that it's something you would use when you acknowledge there are limitations to using just one method, a singular method, and attempts to fill in the gaps between the 2, which is really what qualitative inquiry is all about. This study has 2 aims. We're looking to identify and describe shared meanings among a group of students that have the lived experience of participation in dual enrollment. That's the phenomenology component. And then explore the specific bounded case of those students within the context of this program, this institution, and these semesters they participated, which is the case study component. Our population in general is students who participated in MTSU's dual enrollment program during the 21-22 or 22-23 academic year. It includes students who were enrolled in courses in person at their high schools, and notably, it does exclude students that were enrolled in courses online and or on the college campus. You see the breakdown of percentage by type. The majority of students are enrolled at their high school. And the reason we broke this out for purposes of this study, the reason I broke this out, is that these are 2 fundamentally different experiences that students are having. And so looking at this second group, the group that enrolls on the college campus or online, really necessitates its own study. Just some distinctions there, how the students are registered, who their classmates are, and what kind of a presence on campus they have are all sort of determining factors in their experience, which leads us to divide them into two groups. So this former group, the high school-based dual enrollment, is our target population. And in that population, we're looking at about a 58-42 female-male split, and then you see the race and ethnicity distinctions as well. The sample of the target population is 15 students. All 15 students have matriculated, they have gone on to a higher education institution, and they are currently enrolled at that institution. We are looking at 5 students who matriculated to MTSU, 5 students who went to another four-year institution, and 5 students who attended a community college. This is a purposive sample, deliberately selected for those characteristics because we want to compare and sort of contrast those groups. Of course, the caveat is always that this does not allow for inferences applied to a broader population, but is intended instead to capture individuals that can best inform a researcher about the problem under examination, which is what we're doing here. In terms of instrumentation, I will be using semi-structured interviews as my primary source of data. This is a well-established form of qualitative information. Also considered focus groups and observations, but went against those for a couple of reasons. Focus groups have challenges that are logistical in nature, with students kind of all over the place in terms of geographical location. And then the other one cited in literature, domination of conversation can happen, a tendency to veer towards more normative discourse, and difficulty in managing the group, of course, and encouraging participation. Observations, unfortunately, weren't practical for this study, just given the subjects and the nature of what we're studying. I do believe a longitudinal study that looked at these students while they were engaging in dual enrollment and then following them after would certainly benefit from observation. So that's worth noting. And then there was an interview protocol that I used in terms of instrumentation that was based on Cresswell and Poth, Jacob and Ferguson, and also run through the interview protocol refinement framework from Castillo and Montoya. You can see here the data collection procedures. These were adapted from Cresswell and Cresswell's data collection circle. This is not a linear process. You can kind of jump in at different places depending on the nature of the study, but you see here on the left, the collection procedure, what was actually done, and then the corresponding action taken by me, the researcher, that fits into this category. And then in terms of data analysis, once the data was collected, we're talking about a couple of different things applied here. Coding, both first and second cycle, initially using open-ended codes. Saldana describes them as preliminary jottings. This allows you to kind of organize your thoughts and start to get really broad sort of themes emerging. In vivo coding in particular is, I believe, and backed up by the literature, really useful for phenomenological studies. It allows for the direct use of students' words to describe their lived experiences. And then we move to second cycle coding after first cycle coding, specifically pattern codes. And we're looking for themes, explanations, and concepts that are recurring and kind of bringing those together and synthesizing those. Also using analytic memoing, reflection on everything, the inquiry process, coding specifically, patterns, themes, concepts, identifying unanswered questions and other challenges that the researcher, me, had with collecting the data, and also enhancing trustworthiness, 3 functions of these memos. And then the last bit of analysis that was conducted is what I found as an applied thematic analysis. Guest et al. Sort of laid the framework for this. This is a specific type of thematic analysis. It is trying to examine data inductively across multiple techniques, and it's geared towards practical application of findings, which is really appropriate for a pragmatic sort of worldview, which is where this study is based in, with me as a researcher and a practitioner looking for actionable information that can be used. And finally, I wanted to mention trustworthiness, which is essential in qualitative inquiry. Across the literature, there's 4 broadly accepted criteria for establishing that trustworthiness in qualitative studies, and it has analogs in quantitative research. So credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. And you see their quantitative sort of counterparts. I really used Shenton's guidelines for establishing trustworthiness in those 4 dimensions. For credibility, it's using established methods, familiarity with participants and organization, fostering honesty, and then frequent debriefings and feedback from you, my colleagues, and project supervisors as well. Transferability and dependability are both tricky with qualitative inquiry, and we acknowledge that. But the best things that we can do per Shenton and others is to carefully describe the context, to give lots of details on the research design, data collection, and the reflection process. That's the best we can do as qualitative researchers. And then confirmability or objectivity, if you will, in a quantitative sense. The researcher, me, employed bracketing and analytical memoing to sort of center myself, position myself in the research. That is all I have for the presentation, and appreciate your feedback to come. Thank you.